We are the ones who live here.
نحنا يلي عايشين هون.
I am Farrah Khatib, and we are proud to share with you these stories of life in Lebanon. This episode contains frank conversations about war and its aftermath. We know that some people may find stories on this topic difficult to hear. If it feels like this might be you, take care of yourself first. People from my country see leaving as the goal after graduation. You want a good job? Well, you've got to get abroad to get one. At the airport, the Rafiq Hariri International Airport, just south of Beirut, the only real airport in Lebanon, the only way out of the country, you'd see people on vacation, and then you'd see young people saying goodbye to their family and their friends, not knowing when they'd ever see them again. And every Arab mom believes that love starts with food. So you know that most of them have packed bundles of food in with their clothes. Well, for me, I never learned how to cook, because cooking was expected of me as a woman. I took pride in my refusal, but that meant that there was a good chance I wouldn't be able to feed myself on my own. So when I left Lebanon, my mom made sure that I had so much food, as much food as possible in my luggage. When I left home for my new job in Poland, I had one bag full of clothes, trinkets, and personal belongings, and I had a second bag overstuffed with my mom's food. My whole family was so focused on getting as much food as possible into my luggage that we forgot how airports worked. We even put a bunch of jars and sacks of food into my carry-on bag. I know that you can't take more than a tiny amount of liquids on board, but I wasn't thinking that airports in different places differ on what a liquid is. On my layover in Jordan, one officer told the other to stop the bags going through the scanner. He opened my bag and pulled out a jar of my mom's labneh. He looked at me sadly and tossed it in the bin. I said to him, as sarcastically as I could, "Sahten," which means bon appetit. But he must have seen in my expression the heartbreak and the exhaustion that I felt from leaving my family for who knows how long. He waved me through, ignoring the second jar of labneh that he'd seen beneath the first one on the scanner. I'd also packed a bottle of olives in my luggage. Olives, of course, are pickled and kept in brine, but my mom had drained the brine from the bottle just before she wedged it into my clothes to avoid leaking. She also included clear instructions on how to repickle them once I settled into my apartment. But I never really liked olives. I didn't hate olives, I hated aubergines, but I didn't hate olives. I mean, bitter and salty wasn't a combination that ever appealed to me, and I just didn't see what the big deal was, because the rest of my family was obsessed with olives. They worshipped olives, zaytun. They'd eat them all the time at just about every meal. But it goes beyond food. In Lebanon, we press the zaytun into oil, and we cook with it for the rest of the year. We've been doing this forever, as far back as the generations go. The zaytun harvest always defines the whole year. Was it a good year for zaytun? Then it's a good year. A bad year for zaytun? Then it's a bad year. And you'd be succeeding in life if your family can make it through the whole year without buying oil, because your olive harvest was robust enough. Olives were our culture and our sustenance. Everyone loved them, but I always wanted to be my own person, so I'd rebel and ignore the olives. The rest of the family was like, fine, sure, more for us, and I was happy to stand out and be the source of much conversation about olives and what was wrong with me for not liking them. But every once in a while, I'd wonder if I didn't like olives out of some principle, or if I truly did not like them. So I would try again. I'd take a tiny nibble of one olive, cringe, complain about the taste, and wash it down with bread and lebne. And if it was in winter, I'd throw the pit into the fireplace. So I wasn't too excited when my mom stuck the bottle of unbrined olives into my clothes with her instructions. I wasn't going to eat them anyway, so why the bother? But when I finally got to the tiny apartment in Gdynia, on the northern coast of Poland, almost 4,000 kilometers from my family home south of Beirut, I immediately unpacked the food so nothing would get spoiled. And I started making some fresh brine for the zaytun. My mom's parents are from the south of Lebanon, in the village of Kfar Shuba. It's right on the border with the Palestinian land that is now occupied by the Israeli entity. Over the years, my grandparents bought new parcels of land when they could, and they planted olive trees in them. That's how they tried to build wealth for the generations to come. Their first child, my Aunt Noor, was born in 1953. They had just a few olive trees then. But she's 73 now, and I asked her about her earliest memories with olives.
When we were younger, you know Nasib, the guy who has the cap. Well, his dad, he used to sell sweets. He used to bring sweets and sell them to the people in the olive fields, where everyone is working. You know how the season is early winter, so we would get excited that we're eating sweets and desserts at the beginning of the cold. And it was trade with zaytun. You give him a handful or a jar of olives, and you trade it for sweets. They call this a trade. And of course, I cannot forget just those gatherings.
At the time of the zaytun harvest, the far-flung branches of the family would gather in a field with food for a picnic and tools to gather olives. Someone would start singing. Farmers in Lebanon are known for singing. Most of them have surprisingly smooth voices as opposed to their rough exteriors. That's how you know someone is a practiced farmer. Entire days would be full of music and talking, loud boasting about how many olives they were picking, political debates, critiques of other people's olive-picking methods, and an endless stream of silly and crude jokes. For my Aunt Noor, the zaytun harvest was an idyllic scene of play, tradition, and wonder. But she grew up in more peaceful years for Lebanon. She's the oldest of 10 siblings, and my mom, Abir, is the second to last of her generation. She is 30 years younger than my Aunt Noor. Aunt Noor got married and moved to Kuwait before my mom was even born. Mama is about the same age as Noor's sons, and for her entire life, Lebanon has been at war in some form or another. And especially where she grew up, more so than in the rest of the country. What's war and what's peace has been mixed up her entire life. Bombs might go off around you for no reason, at any time. You see, in 1948, Israeli settlers in Palestine committed their first Nakba. This catastrophe, this genocide, was one of the first brutal attacks that Israeli settlers inflicted on the Palestinian people, just south of Lebanon. Since then, with one genocidal attack after another, Israeli settlers kept expanding their territory until they shared a border with Lebanon. And then they kept expanding north. In 1978, they first invaded Lebanon. and soon they occupied villages like Farshuba, where my mom grew up. And in 1982, the Israeli occupation in Lebanon reached as far as Beirut. After 18 years of resistance, Lebanese freedom fighters were finally able to drive the enemy from most of the land in May of the year 2000. But the Israeli occupation still reigns over some parts of the Lebanese south, like Shib'a Farms and Kfar Shuba Heights, which includes some of my family's inherited lands. If you think about what it means to live in that world that was so fundamentally unstable, where any peaceful, joyous ritual might shatter beneath a bomb or a missile or a drone strike from Israel, you understand the anxiety that runs through everything. I asked my mom about her first zaytun harvest.
The first thing I remember, I'll tell you, we were once going to the field with my parents and my friend now, Nelly, you know her, Farah. There weren't many people who would go to pick olives in that area. Most of the land was neglected, so it was just our family and Nelly's. We had just made it to the olive fields when the Israeli army started a maneuver, and you could hear the sound of bombings all around. There were sounds of strikes. I remember I held onto the olive tree and started crying and shouting. My family still makes fun of me over this now. My mom had told them the story of me clinging to the tree out of fear. I think I was the most scared out of everyone. We were stuck. We couldn't leave because the road wasn't safe either, and we couldn't just stay there. I think this was the first olive picking season I remember going to. I was like 10 or 11 years old. I can never forget this. I even remember my father trying to calm us down by explaining it's just a regular procedure. We ended up leaving in a hurry, barely got home safe, and went to sleep. We went back the next day and kept going until the olive picking was done. We were kids, and I remember we were scared of going back, but we couldn't let the olives go to waste.
My mom's village was under Israeli occupation, which meant dealing with random attacks, air raids, and constant terror, at least from the year 1978 till 2000. But it was never called a war, and no one in other countries seemed to care. I was born in 2000, and in 2006, I was with my family in my mom's village, right on the Israeli border, when war officially broke out again. My dad took me and my brothers out to our neighbor's balcony to show us where the rockets were hitting. The horrible crashes we'd heard while we were indoors worried my brothers and me. So my dad wanted to reassure us. See, they're 2 whole towns over, he said, as we watched houses like ours explode. As traumatizing as this memory was, I still just remember it in fragments. Scary sounds, everyone in a panic. My mom was arguing with her parents. Everything was rushed and then we fled. And all the roads home seemed to be blocked. The next Eid, as lights filled up the sky, the memory and the trauma still held on to me and my younger cousins. Our older cousins, the experts, told us it was just photo flash bombs, because they could automatically recognize the sound. You know, since practice makes perfect, I guess. One older cousin took us to the roof to watch the show. That war had officially ended 33 days later, in August. But the rockets, the missile strikes, and the sonic booms from Israeli fighter jets that flew low over your village to shatter the windows in your home and to terrify your children, those have never stopped. Olive trees in our region have a deep historic and even religious affection. In the Quran, the olive tree is a source of heavenly light. In the Hebrew Bible, the dove carries a twig from an olive tree to show that the floodwaters will soon recede and God's people will live in peace. Olive trees are known to grow and to provide for centuries, and some of the ones in my country date back almost 6,000 years, They can, however, burn up in just seconds. Though their war was supposedly against Hezbollah, Israeli forces specifically targeted our olive trees, often with white phosphorus, which is banned internationally and poisons the land and makes it infertile for years to come. The UN estimates that they completely destroyed 47,000 olive trees in Lebanon, and as many as 80% of the trees in the south were damaged by these attacks. The last zaytun harvest that anyone from my family was able to participate in October of 2023, was the worst that my Aunt Noor can remember. Certainly the worst since she moved back to Lebanon. Few people dared to go this time. It was too dangerous. And there was no picnic, no party. They worked as quickly as they could so they could get out.
People just encouraged each other. People from the village were going, and as long as people were being active, it means things are stable. Especially for me. I only did the olive trees right next to my house there. I didn't go to the one in the big fields, closer to the border. Almost no one did. So we went. But I can't believe we made it back. We got terrified. Everything was super fast. Your Uncle Nazi was working with his electronic harvester, while I and your Uncle Ali and his sister Siham all worked by hand. We did everything too fast, as if we're stealing something. The scariest part was the way there. That's maybe the only scary part. You can't trust the roads. Also, when we were leaving the olives at the press, you know your Uncle Wajih is there. Just after we left, your Uncle Nazih called again. As soon as he did, I knew something was wrong. He tried to mask it by inviting us for lunch at his house on our way back. When we got there, as soon as his wife Asmahan saw us, she broke down laughing. She asked us, "You didn't hear the booming?" But we didn't know. We didn't. The booming was right behind the medical clinic of Kfar Hamam, right next to the olive press.
She pauses and then she says,
Another memory that stands out for me is that moment with my father, your grandpa. Every time I see the olive trees, I can just imagine him.
I remember my grandfather as a contradiction. I remember him being bigger than life itself, but I also remember him being old and frail. He was a man of many talents and many stories. When he was a child, the Ottomans ruled the region, and he once recited the national anthem of the Ottoman Empire to me. This ancient man dreaming back to a song of his childhood, back to when he was almost the same age as his granddaughter, who stood by his chair and asked him to tell me stories. My Aunt Noor says that every time she sees olive trees, she remembers the zaytun harvest in 2008. I was 8 at the time, and I remember it vividly too. My grandfather was sick with cancer at over 90 years old, and he was nearing his deathbed. His bones were brittle, and his back was hunched with age. And still, he walked up to the biggest and oldest tree, and he started to climb it. His wife and his children all begged him to stop, but he refused, saying he had to harvest the top of this tree himself. So he hauled himself up slowly into the crown of the tree. And as he slowly reached for the olives around him, he looked out over the grove of trees he'd nurtured, so they could serve his family long after he was gone. He died in 2012, and Israel now bombs the olive groves. The trees that are 100 years old and have given us their sustenance and their warmth for 100 years now burn to ash. And I'm in my apartment in Gdynia, on the northern coast of Poland, eating olives with my mom's kishik, while I scroll through videos on my phone, watching my country burn. Nima Salha read the English translation for my mother, Abir Yahya, and Maria Clara Al-Anderi read the English translation for my aunt, Noor Yahya. We Are the Ones Who Live Here was produced by Ben Murad and me, Farrah Khatib. Our associate producer is Lien Jradi. Our editorial team includes Rita Mhanna, Rana Baghdadi, Ilyas Dimajian, Maya Adra, Nasreen Azizi, Jennifer Nasrallah, and Leticia Harib. Our sound producer is Wilson Vediner. Our music was made by Rafi Ghali, aka Tsatsa. We want to thank our Season 2 hero, Aisha Ghazzoul, and our Season 2 sponsors, Stephanie Barr, Jay Schubert, and Michelle Murad for their exceptional support. We couldn't have done this without you. This podcast was also made possible with the support of the Center for American Studies and Research, KZAR, at the American University of Beirut. We want to hear your stories of life in Lebanon, or just what you think of the show. Reach out to us on Instagram at WeLebanonPod. You can also email us at WeLebanonPod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.